Welcome to the virtual HR Huddle. It's great to have so many people with us today. We're going to discuss the importance of managing motivation of employees during COVID-19, and I'm thrilled to welcome Graham Ravenscroft as our guest speaker. Graham's the lead performance coach for Gateway HR, and he's coached 2 world champions in the last 18 months and 3 Olympians. So I think we were extremely lucky to have him with us and to share his insights into the importance of motivation during this crisis and to assist us with practical advice. So today's session, as I mentioned, is going to be a Q&A style. Thank you to people who have sent questions in prior to this afternoon. If you haven't, don't worry. If you do have questions as we're going along, please put them in the chat box. I will be keeping an eye on discussing things with Graham and the chat box and try and get us through as many as we can in the time that we've got. So let's get going. Graham, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Would you mind outlining us for us, first of all, what is motivation?
Okay, so my interest in it, of course, is very much part and parcel of my own personal development as a performance coach for more than 3 decades. And I've also been a manager as well. My day job for 30 years was fire service. So I was a manager in that world. And of course, I've spent the best part of 10 years now working with business leaders and across all industries, really, to develop performance. So I obviously become really, I notice very much about the impact that actual motivation has in a positive sense and a negative sense. And as a leader and a performance coach, you very much have to understand it and be able to tap into intrinsic motivation in order to sort of get the best attention and engagement from, you know, the coachee or the employee.
So, I mean, motivation is essential at any time, isn't it? But at the moment, in a global pandemic, and you know, everybody is dealing with things in different ways. How important is motivation in the workplace at the moment, do you think?
So let me just blanket this and say it's important all the time, in the sense that it is our driving force. It's the reason we do things, the reason we want to do things. If we're going to do things to a varying degree, then motivation will underpin the amount of effort or enthusiasm that you actually put in. So, for example, if we're completely unmotivated by the task that we're given, then you're not going to get a high level of performance. Spin that on its head, 180 degrees, and you absolutely tap in and give people the opportunity to do something that sits very much within their intrinsic motivation. So the reason they want to be, and you create an environment where they're allowed to do that, then you get high engagement, high enthusiasm, and of course, high productivity, which is what we're all looking for. And I realize, why have I spent, I get asked this a lot, I don't get paid to be an athletics performance coach, and yet I've given 33 years of my life to it. Some people are surprised by that with the level I work at. There's lots of reasons for that. A lot of it's choice. So why do I do it? And so there's an intrinsic motivator for me to actually, be involved with the performers and develop them and fuel their sort of enthusiasm and success. So I get motivated by their success. So take that away. Yeah, I don't quite feel the same complete person. I'm definitely demotivated. So,
you've mentioned intrinsic motivation there, because obviously there's intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, isn't it? Would you mind kind of just outlining that for people who perhaps it's not so clear for?
So when you talk about intrinsic motivation, it's there's a number of things here. But it's the reason why we want to do something. It's our why. You'll have heard that a lot. But I call it our purpose. So what's my purpose as a performance coach? And it's that coaching for me fuels that purpose that's within me. So it's understanding, in terms of an external factor like a manager, a business leader, or a performance coach, getting the best out of the people. Then, of course, in order to do that, you need to understand what it is that makes those people tick. And if you can engage in that, and if you can engage them or create a task or a role or an environment, particularly a performance environment, which actually feeds that driving force, then you're absolutely on the money. Extrinsic feedback comes from a number of, sorry, not feedback, extrinsic motivation comes from a number of sources. And so, for example, if we think, if we got role models or parents, people of influence that we want to, for whatever reason, we feel we want to please, people that, inspire us or you want to do well for, then of course they're examples of it in, extrinsic motivation.
And am I right in thinking that ideally we want people to be intrinsically motivated because they're much easier then to manage, to get them to do what we want them to do?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, yes. So self-motivation, of course, would be perfect, wouldn't it? Everybody came through the door. They were highly motivated. They sat down there. They brought their whole self to the place of work. And of course, we've landed on the money. We've got a business front to back, left to right, with 360 degrees, full of people who are highly enthusiastic, love coming to work, love what they do, have a real sense of purpose about it. It fuels their inner drive, and they just come and crack on and give you 100%. Beautiful.
Happy days. That would, I don't know about everybody else, but that would make my life really easy. So how you've mentioned purpose already. How is purpose linked to motivation?
Okay, so there's a number of things here. So as I say, the purpose in the sense that there's a reason that people will do things and want to do it. More importantly, there's a reason that people will want to do it to a particular standard. And that their sense of purpose, if you can engage in that sense of purpose, then they get it. So why are we doing it? Now, from a business point of view, if you look at people within their roles, really important that the leaders, managers, business owners get people to completely make people understand and have clarity around what it is that they want them to do. Why do we do this? What's the reason we do this? If people don't understand the reason why they do it, then even if they do it, I'm not sure they'll do it to the best of their ability. Can I offer you a little anecdotal reference to this? It's it's a lovely story, and I'll quote the lady. This is a real story. It's not Nick and the Man on the Moon or something. I'll give you a personal one. It's incredible. I had the incredible pleasure of spending about 2 hours with a stunning lady called Dame Sue Campbell, who some of you may have read about, heard about. Incredible. She was just the immediate, head of UK sport, as in across the sport. And she'd spent some time some years ago with Formula One. And she went into, she had the incredible opportunity to spend some time in the pit lane with Michael Schumacher, God bless him, and his recovery and his family, etc., after his accident. But she was in actually his pit lane when he was world champion. And she said, I slipped into the garage thinking I'm sort of in the way and just in awe of this high level performance. We think of high performance, Formula One.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's the top end of business and incredible. And she said, I was looking around and there was such busyness apart from one person. And it was a guy actually leaning on a broom or a mop. He was actually leaning on a mop. And so she said, I slid across the wall and sort of introduced herself. And when she asked him, she said, what's your purpose here? And he said, I was, part of the team to make Michael world champion. And that was his answer. And she said, but what's your role? What do you do? He said, I'm the cleaner of the garage. And she said, then I stepped back and realized, and I thought, do you know what's incredible about it is she said, I could literally have emptied my dinner or pack up on the floor. It was that clean. It was that. And I thought, is that pride? Is that about, no, it wasn't pride. It was about purpose. He understood absolutely his purpose. Now that car's about to go out the garage and corner, 150, 160 miles an hour. It's going to hit 200 miles an hour on the straight. Now, if there's anything wrong with that car, if there's one speck of oil, one speck of water, one fragment of metal that comes out that car, then people need to see it. And it was that sense. But what was nice as well, she said that she then had to think about it and look round. And when Michael came in, this guy was wearing exactly the same clothes. He had exactly the same badges, same shoes, same clothes. So again, his sense of purpose, he had absolute clarity about what his role was, why he had to do it, and he would understand the impact of doing it well or not so well. That sense of purpose. I hope that explains it.
I was going to say, sorry to interrupt, that's it, isn't it? It's not just understanding the purpose and buying into the purpose of why you're doing something, it's understanding the impact of everybody's individual role within the whole scheme of things.
Absolutely, yes. There's a reason we have a team, isn't there? You know, we develop teams for so many reasons. Let's not take this into a team bit, but just touching on it, you know, we widen the innovation, you know, the skill base, the knowledge, the creative thinking, the decision making, etc., etc. So every role is absolutely critical. And if you take a role out, or one role isn't doing as well as the others, then they need to understand the impact on the wider organisation, if that makes sense. Yes. So again, it's that sense of purpose. If you choose to not do your job so well today, this is the consequence to the people in your team and the wider business.
Brilliant. Yeah, that explains it perfectly. So going on to some questions that people have messaged in, if that's okay. So, and this session is about mainly for employees, but obviously we're employees of businesses as well. So some people have had some personal questions in here, or questions about individuals. And this is an interesting one, because somebody's emailed in and said, in a crisis, such as now, when understandably we're not at our best, so as leaders, as HR professionals, we're individually not at our best. Should we let me try and speak. Should we be working on our motivation first, or the motivation of our teams and our employees? Yeah.
Well, that's a great question. Whoever sent that in, pat yourself on the back. Let me take a breath. Yeah. So I want to just automatically say everything, of course. That is the right answer. Let me. One thing I've learned with high-performing people is on a particular day, if you think of high performance, it peaks for a reason. The reason we call it a personal best or a best moment is because we don't repeat it. So if we repeat it all the time, it's not our best. It's called the norm. It's called average. Okay. That's what we do. If in order for people to be at their best, then lots of stars need to align, in my opinion. You know, the time and the resources, the equipment, your experience, you know, single moments that come together. In order to be the best, to get the best out of the people that I worked with and I've worked with, I genuinely feel that I need to be the best version of myself. So I would say, if you understand, I understand that when a performer comes into the room, or somebody that I'm working with, I look at a problem. It's very seldom is it the single problem in isolation. There will be factors that are affecting a performance in a particular area. Okay, so we do have to address that. But what I will say is, for you to be the very best, if I want to be the best husband, the best father, the best friend, colleague, the best manager, the best performance coach, then I need to be a pretty good version of myself, for sure. Otherwise, I don't believe I can be all that I want to be to the people around me. So it is a tough time for leaders, but hey, with leadership and responsibility, greatness comes responsibility. So it is a time for leadership, and it is a time for us to look after those around us. But I tell you what, I don't think there was ever a time when it was a time to look after ourselves.
Yeah. So there's two things here, isn't there? We need to make sure that we're our self-care, we're looking after ourselves, so that we are in the best condition that we can be to support 100%. Our teams and our employees through what is a difficult time. So
if we have, sorry Eloise, if we haven't got that right, then I don't believe, I've not seen too many versions where that we're being all that we can be to the people we need to be.
This is where they say, isn't it, on an aeroplane, put on your own oxygen mask first before you put it on somebody else. So in a similar situation, we need to make sure that we are looking after ourselves so we can care for other people and help to motivate them. And,
absolutely.
And we've had a session on how we do that for ourselves. But, you know, every day can be different, can't it? So somebody else has emailed in and said, this made me smile. why are there days where we can have exactly the same amount of work and challenges, yet one day we can feel really enthusiastic to tackle them, and the next day not? You know,
it's called
why
life,
is that?
isn't it? It's called life. It's called people. It's called circumstance. Listen, we were all moving along nicely. Again,
Yeah, we were.
Anecdotally, it's nice to sort of bring things in to make a point. You know, I had a couple of people really getting excited about being in Tokyo, and then the world just took it away from them. And they're going, now why do I do what I do? You know, I don't know when it'll be. And it's, so it's things that get in the way. And I think that's when it's a time for leaders, managers, performance coaches to remind people, as I was saying, of a couple of things. We've touched on purpose already. So remind people of why they do what they do. You know, the circumstances, the environment, the timing might have changed, but we still do it for a reason. And if the reason is still relevant, so it stays the same, so the performance goal is still there, so the timing's changed, when it'll happen's changed, but it's still important for you. The second bit is to try and remind people of how meaningful it is what they are doing. I think meaningfulness is so important. And again, there's impact. So meaningfulness is saying, is the way you choose to do it. Is it contributing towards the end goal, to what we're trying to do? If it isn't, stop bloody doing it. As simple as that. If it really isn't, you know what I mean? And the other thing is to understand impact. Remind people of the impact. And one of the things I did, if I can quote Gateway, you know, obviously I'm not HR people. No, I've got no idea. So I'm not HR, but one of the things I picked up in the early stages in their busyness, as I'm sure you were, was to pick up their peace of mind call, so I could speak to clients, introduce myself, and all the rest of it. But the feedback I was getting, I thought, what a beautiful thing to have. And I made sure that I went back to every single one of that team, you know, and I filled in a bit and I emailed the wider team so that they understood that what they were doing in isolation and finding really difficult, the impact that it was having on the people they were servicing was so huge that was me providing them with the, you know, the extrinsic motivation.
Yeah, brilliant. I think, and I can relate to that, because at the moment I'm spending a lot of time speaking to our clients, but also to job seekers and candidates. So, and that's, you know, that might be people that we've placed into roles recently that have unfortunately been made redundant already, or been put on furlough, or people who are registered with this, or even, you know, not registered. They've lost their jobs, and you know, they're really struggling because they're struggling then to find new jobs. And I see that as a real privilege. You know, sometimes, you know, our motivations are up and down at the moment, aren't they? But when I get to speak to somebody like that, and I think, actually, I can make a difference. I can't get them a job necessarily, but I can make a difference by giving them some good advice, or pointing them in the right direction, or, you know, and I'm sure from a HR perspective, that's, you know, we've all got examples like that. I think it's making sure that, you know, that we, for our people, where perhaps they don't see, I'm trying to explain, where they don't get that big kick back, they can't necessarily see the meaningfulness or purpose of their day-to-day job. It's in this moment, it's making sure that we open that up for them and help them to remember what it is. Is that
totally
right?
agree. Listen, I'll be honest with you, I'd never been on a Zoom call 6 weeks ago. I'm on them every day. I'm a team thing this morning, or whatever it's called, Microsoft. I am so
Microsoft.
Just forgive me. This is like a whole new world. But it's still sparking my motivation and my enthusiasm, because I can still do what my purpose, I believe, is. And I think we have to do that. There's a bit of a clue here, and it is called isolation. It's in that word, isolation. And, you know, when people are in isolation, why wouldn't you feel slightly isolated? And I think, you know, it's important now for HR people, for business leaders, to make sure that we find a way to bridge the gap of that isolation, to bring people back into communication, feel like they're involved, like you say, provide them with the feedback. When you're in a room full of people, you're getting feedback all day, whether you realize it or not. You get it through gesture, through communication, through smiles, through facial expression, through words, through pictures. We constantly pick up feedback, and feedback is a huge motivator. That's a massive extrinsic motivator. Just to be told you're doing well, or be told how you could do it better, or be engaged in a conversation to get you thinking, to tune somebody in, to provide some more motivation. And we have to remember that, people that are in isolation are feeling isolated. And, Maslow sits straight in the middle. Let's pick an old model. Why wouldn't we? There's a reason it's still around, because it's the fact that one of those bits as we climb up through the basic stuff is that sense of belonging and feeling a part of something. And you know what? There's organisations all over the world where I spent 30 years, crikey, I was living at home when I joined the fire service. Actually, my mum taught me how to iron, and she did. And I can say, hand on my heart, when I left 30 years later, nobody ever ironed my kit. Because I was so proud of the badge and the brand and the epaulets. And so it was that I was motivated. I certainly wasn't motivated by the pay in the fire service. Let's not go down that route. But I was motivated by the brand and like I say, feeling a part of something special. All of our people, are we making them feel a part of something right now that is so out of sight, out of mind? Look at us now. This is massive, and I know organisation and working for, even if it's 5 or 10 minutes of doing this every day. If somebody doesn't want to be for some reason, then fine. But I think it's so important to make sure that people are feeling involved and a part of something
and connected.
Yeah, connected, not isolation.
I know I did have a question that actually really linked to this, which isn't. So somebody's asked, and it's along the isolation point, and they said, what can we do to motivate those people that are struggling to work remotely from home? So good employees that are usually really productive in an office environment, but their productivity is slumped working from home, and that obviously does link nicely into the isolation point, doesn't it?
So one of the things about why do we bring people to work in the first place? Why does everybody not work at home? I won't answer that.
I don't know. That might change. Now we all know we can work from home.
Well, and I think it will, and I'm sure that's another question which we can touch on. I hope we do. But to answer that question, one of the great bits and challenges, I think, to business leaders is to create the environment where people are motivated by the environment. So that's the people in it. They're inspired by people in it. They get that sense of, what's the word? It's almost the influence that people have, by being a good role model or a boss. And I want to do well for you. And I think so we have to understand that when we take people out of the environment, and by the way, don't underestimate that sense of belonging, as I said again, and that engagement that you can have. You don't even know you have. Even passing somebody in the corridor, there's people around us. So we've got used to that sort of environment, and that's the environment that we associate with high performance. And now
we're sociable beings, aren't we? We're very sociable beings.
Yeah, so we just chucked everybody back at home now, same four walls. So I think it's important, what I've done, there's so much been done, we can talk about it as long as you want. But I think, the other thing is, have the people got the tools? If we think about this, some work done, I don't know if anybody's read the book Drive, actually, by Daniel Pink. Fantastic piece of work, and so much research on Drive. So if you want to talk about motivation, get yourself Daniel Pink, 2011, I think, Canadian author. But he summed it up in sort of 3 words, and he talked about purpose, of course, which was a starting point. So we've done that one. The second one, of course, was this idea of mastery. And if you look at Maslow at the top, it's self-actualization. So the reality is people are mostly driven by wanting, actually, people. We could all come up with one or two really annoying people in the workplace. If we get rid of those just for the time being, then generally everybody, like the people I can see, are all good, nodding and laughing and thinking. Anyway, so forget those. The reality is that people do actually want to be the best they can be. So the thing about the environment in the workplace is we do our best, don't we, to create, or people that do well and have high performing teams actually create an environment where people can be the best they can be. How does that happen? It happens from the quality of the training. It happens from a coaching and mentoring type system where it's their development supported. It happens with the appropriate resources, the amount of time, support. So if you think about all those things and then just go and sit somebody in their living room, you took it all away.
Yeah.
So how much of that? Sorry, please, Eloisa.
No, I was going to say, because that's part of the problem, isn't it? You know, some people have offices that they can work from at home. Sure. Fabulous. Yeah. Don't know about. I'm set up, not today, but I'm set up on my kitchen table usually with the children around.
I'm just covering it up with stuff so you can't see it.
Sometimes I'm in the lounge, depending on where the children are. Absolutely. You know, and you're kind of like, you're not surrounded by your usual comforts. So not only have you not got your team, you haven't got all your stuff necessarily, or the thing that gets you in the zone.
I think the support that is required for people to work in an environment where they can be as good as they can be. So take them into the workplace, you know, have those discussions. What can we do? Practice. It might be nothing, but what can we do to change the environment to actually allow them to be as good as they can be in that moment? And it may be a discussion and just support them in that you might not be working at the level you have been, but it's a very high level because we're given different circumstances. I had a guy, forgive me, win a world championships in Dubai in October, and I wish I was back in that sunshine. Anyway, so and it was lovely. The relevance was 18 months before that day, he became famous for all the very wrong reasons, because he's a Paralympian and he was born with talipes, which is a club foot, and he's got different hypertrophy in both his legs, so very small leg at the bottom. So, and he became the only known athlete in the world to fully rupture the Achilles tendon in that leg. It's over. It's finished, but of course it wasn't. And anyway, the rest's history. But what I'm saying is, the environment that he had to work in and the stuff he was doing changed, immeasurably, completely different. But I had to remind him again, it was still part of a process. It was still incredibly valuable. If you're going to get back to a particular point, then the stuff that we've got a certain gap where we have to be purposeful. Everything that we do has to be purposeful. It has to have meaning to the end result, which is to get back to the point where we left, and then we can move on again. I think we're in the same environment, aren't we? It's exactly the same. So we've got to maintain, just because we've changed the environment. Like I said, I get strapped now on a phone, trying to think about this, but my face gets strapped on some railings in some park in Milton Keynes, and I do another one in Derby where I'm watching technical sessions. And who'd have thought that I could actually record some movement and edit it and send it by the time they get back to the phone. So we can do it, but we have to think differently. So I think I don't want to digress too much. I hope I've stayed on the question. Think about the people and the fact that they do want to be the best they can be. People are motivated by that. They could be quickly demotivated if they feel that the work they're doing hasn't got any meaning, or is not impacted, or is not of good quality. So reassurance, even in the home, what can we do to the home to actually create an environment? And you might not have the answers, but ask them the questions. Charles, go on.
I was going to say, quite often people have the answers themselves, don't they? So it's just asking the question of, what can you do to help yourself? What can you do to increase your productivity?
Totally.
And they will know.
Yeah. Now, the role of a coach is exactly that, isn't it? A coach is somebody that has a question for your answer.
Because it's not always about telling people what to do, is it? Because actually they're more likely to do what's good for them if they come up with it themselves.
Yeah, they'll be more motivated by it.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I have a morning routine. New in the last month, 5 weeks. I have before I start work. It's not very interesting.
Well, let us decide.
So I will get up before the kids get up. I'll do a 20-minute HIIT session. That's just my thing. So I'm up and I'm moving, and even on the days I really don't want to do it, I'm up and I do that. But then aside from that, myself and the children and the dog will all go out for a morning walk. So before we start work, we will go out for a morning walk, and I have a gratitude journal. So every single morning, even when I sit there and I think, on the darkest mornings, when this first was happening, and I don't know about you, but I was shell shocked and I went into panic, and everything was like, I wrote in my gratitude journal, and you can see how it's changed as the days have gone by. And I mean, that's a habit that I had beforehand, but I have to say that morning ritual, the days where I've not done it, I have really struggled with motivation or perhaps with keeping my cool in certain situations. So I think helping somebody in this kind of situation, going back to the question, is if they're not as productive as they want to be, when they are productive, when they are having a good day, what were you doing? And can we do that every single day?
So absolutely, yes, I agree. And I think that's really, really good. You obviously touched on it on another webinar, and so we won't go over that. But what you're talking about there and what you're doing is looking after yourself. And I think it's important because you get a really good response from yourself for the rest of the day by following this particular set of bits, and it makes you feel good and you're ready for it and so on. Again, that's exactly the point, isn't it? That we do that and then we walk through a particular door, we sit at a particular desk, we go to a particular coffee machine, and we've just taken it all away. But there's lots of things, so we have to help people create a new situation that actually prepares them for that. And again, in the workplace, hopefully people aren't eating their dinners these days at their computers, and I'm sure they are somewhere. But whatever you do and you step away, this is an opportunity. And if I could just share one of the last words, and I think it's relevant now, that I didn't get to in terms of Daniel Pink's summary of.
Yeah, sorry.
No, it's very relevant to what you just said. And the last one is autonomy. So basically what he was saying is when people understand their purpose, when they have absolute clarity around it, is what they do and why they do it and the impact of doing it or not doing it. When we create an environment that actually feeds that sense of purpose, so we give them the opportunity to do it to the best they can be, the last bit is create an environment where you let the buggers get on with it. I'm allowed to say bugger on anyway. You edit that.
It's fine.
We let them get on with it, okay? And of course, so when we talk about people are much more motivated, right, by stuff that they own. Well, forget the autocratic, authoritarian leaders. Short term, yes, that's a conversation for another day. Maybe you'll come up with an example. Show me one that lasted for a long period of time with the same staff. No, it doesn't exist, all right? So people do stuff because they want to, not because they're told to. All right, there's evidence all over for that. So again, it's that sense within the autonomy. What a time when we want people to own stuff, all right, and actually create their workload and do things because they want. What an opportunity. Talking of ownership now, I've seen so many great examples, honestly. And leaders have come back to me just so inspired. Now, the challenge is going to be when the situation turns, which I'm sure we'll come to in a bit.
Yeah, I was going to say that was my finale question.
How did I know? But of course, so it's not all bad. You've got some people that have responded incredibly positively to this. And you can take out of this what you will, and maybe, you're going to try stuff and employ it. So there's lots of good stuff come out, I hope, that, we can think about To try stuff. But yeah, ownership.
Brilliant. Do you think that if somebody has a set plan for their day, that has an impact on motivation? You know, because I know that some employers have kind of put timetables together for people, or given them blank timetables and told them, like, plan your day, you know, as we would do in a normal work environment.
So there's a couple of different people here, so forgive me, it's not like that perfect answer, but I'm going to give you some answers there. You know, if I looked at the audience now, you don't need to stick your hands up for those few I can see or whatever, and those loads I can't, but just in your own head, for a rhetorical question for the time being, to think about, you know, how many people love to work to a strict plan and the rest of it? Okay, I'll stick, not me, by the way. So, so there we go. We've got two people, one does, one doesn't. Okay, so that's the perfect starting point to answer your question. I think it's about knowing your people. So that's the important thing. And if we know people and we can identify people, so now I know Eloise wants to get up, she wants to do a walk, and I'm going to.
That's exactly me.
And that's good.
Control.
But I think, you know, so when we know we've got people like that, we need to make sure that we're feeding that. That's the point I was saying again. We need to feed their purpose, and to have that strict regime is what people want. They want to be told what they need to do, and they want it in a time. Now, other people, that's the worst possible scenario, isn't it? You know, and the other thing, and I'm bound to say this as a performance coach, by the way, I don't want to tell somebody how to do something. I just think it's an incredibly self-limiting idea that, listen, if I need to tell somebody how to do something because I want something done in a particular way, in a particular time, then of course I would tell them how to do it, because I know what I would get. If I don't want to limit the performance of a person or limit the innovation that might come as a consequence of just allowing them, how dare I allow them to think about how they could do it for themselves? If that's supported, I just think the opportunity to actually create an environment where there's more innovation and more flexibility. How long are we talking about flexibility? I can't wait to see the impact of some of the people. And like in every other sense of life, you're going to get some people that just hate this, Eloise, you know, that just need to be in their place of work at the desk with the stuff around them. Maybe I'm naive. I like to think you're going to have equally as many, if not more people that just, I don't know, just might thrive through this. But they're going to
I agree.
Take some handling, by the way. It's going to take some handling.
I absolutely agree, and I think there's some people that are really thriving with the flexibility, and actually I think it'll be really interesting afterwards where, you know, I spend a lot of time talking to employers where they'll say, well, then this job can't be done from home. This job, you know, no, but we can't give flexibility for this role. Well, do you know what? Lo and behold, we're all working from home and we're making it work. So, so another scenario for you. So, you know. And this is, again, a very practical scenario. It's advice for dealing with this particular situation. So, you know, and the question is it possible to motivate somebody or to keep them motivated where they're in a scenario where an employee gets ill, for example, and as a business or, you know, as HR people, we're having to put somebody on statutory sick pay.
Right, so particular purpose, So, so they've been working, or they've been furloughed. Sorry, they've been on full pay working, or they've gone statutory.
And you know, so they're going to. I think the point is somebody is, you know, has been working, they've become ill, so they're going on to statutory sick pay, which, you know, we all know isn't very much. You know, how do we keep that person motivated during that time and that situation?
Yeah, well, I mean, you know what? If we're crap leaders or managers or the rest of it, we could just say you're getting your sick pay, just recover. But of course, that's not what I'd recommend at all. And you know, when Jonathan ruptured his fully ruptured his Achilles tendon, I communicated it with him every day rather than a couple of times a week, because you've got to recognise that people need to feel supported even more there. They can't do what they do anymore. And don't forget as well, when we have a massive reduction in pay, of course, we're now starting to impact on the very first row of our hierarchical needs, which is this idea. We could get onto the money thing, couldn't we? But we're talking that we would have an impact here. We're potentially affecting people's, food, oxygen, that existing thing. So if we can't do it with money, how else can we do it? How else can you as a business leader, support somebody in that particular time of crisis? I don't think this would be any different than if somebody was in that situation from the workplace. But I think they're probably seeing it as different. And I would ask you to say, actually, what would I do if they were actually went on to statutory sick pay from the same building that I work in? That's just a question to think about there and pause. So I'm saying, in terms of answer to the question, I would really urge people to make sure that in terms of lines of communication, that there's much more communication with them. I would literally, in that sense, you do need to set some sort of plan in place. One is to have a point in time to focus on when we can return to normal. And secondly, work with them to actually create a structured plan that allows them to keep getting remotivated. So we're actually creating steps. So when Jonathan ruptured his Achilles, the thought of jumping 2 meters and 15 in a world para champs or whatever, Olympic Games, was the furthest thing from his mind. And this bloke was wondering if he'd ever walk again, without this thing on. So exactly the same, so I raised the level of communication, as in more often. We changed we set almost daily. Sometimes it's a daily an opportunity. What can I do to actually create or provide more motivation in the same day? Something that we could do that we never did yesterday. Just that, so it's that sense of I'm moving back to this bit. And is there any other way that we can support the level of pay reduction? I don't mean we haven't got the money to give them it, but to ask those questions. There are a lot of things out there and around there, and obviously, if I had a magic wand, it would be easy in this moment, wouldn't it? But I would encourage you to just think about all the possibilities that could potentially fill the gap that pay has. But it's a really tough one because, we're not talking about reward, we're talking about the basic level of living. If we drop below that, then of course you're in a very different world of panic and so on. That's the time to be supportive and see if there's absolutely anything we can do to reduce the impact that the loss of pay is going to have, and particularly to provide motivation to see that they're moving out of it.
I think, Graham, that's brilliant advice, because I think we can probably all relate to that. I know I personally can, not necessarily to people who are off sick, but also to people who have been put on furlough. If businesses aren't topping up and employees are going down to 80% pay, for some people that can have quite dire consequences. And thinking then about communicating with them more as well, to keep them motivated and engaged with the business, and just motivated even to get through each day, because obviously different people are handling these situations in different ways. You've got people who are still working, you've got people in warehouses, in factories, in office buildings where they can. You've got people who are working remotely, and then you've got people who have been furloughed. And motivation for all of the I know motivation goes across the board, up and down for everybody, but people will be in different situations. And I just thought, actually, those answering that question of somebody who's on less pay for statutory sick actually is very relevant to employees that you've got on furlough. So we need to be communicating with people even more than we perhaps are.
And I think sometimes don't underestimate the smallest bit of news here. I get asked all the time, in terms of communication, working with people, because it's incredible. Even the best teams, the most highly successful, honestly, 100% of workshops, 100% of coaching sessions with teams, this thing of communication will still come up. And you think, God, you're incredible at it. but they still think that's a challenge. And it's how much do people need to know? What do they need to know? And I'll be honest, sometimes I answer it. I won't digress, but I'll make a point. I'll sometimes answer it by saying there's a reason the government doesn't tell us everything, okay? And they're right not to, because trust me, we wouldn't get out of our beds and the rest of it. But in terms of businesses operate in the same way. The reason we have hierarchical positions and structures and directors and that is because it's pretty much a need to know basis to a point. I would urge you to consider now to really step back and look at this idea of what people need to know in a slightly different way. I think this is an opportunity to actually share information, any information, even if it's maybe not what someone wants to hear. I think people need clarity. One of the problems that I'm listening to on the TV, people I'm speaking to, and it's not a cheap shot at a government where I can't imagine how to deal with this, but is the lack of clarity in certain areas. I think it's clarity we need now. And if somebody's in that position, I think even the smallest little bit, even if you've got nothing to say, communicate the fact that you've got nothing to add today and reassure them that I'll come back tomorrow with something, anything. And if you've got nothing to say the following day, communicate the fact that nothing's changed. Okay, I really do think it's that important to have those much higher levels of communication. And any bit of good news,
I love that.
make sure you give them it.
I love that, because I think it's really easy, isn't it, to retract into a bit of a cave, and think, well, I've got this work to do and I'm going to get it done, and and I'm guilty of that sometimes, and then I think I put my head up and think, oh gosh, I haven't spoken to any of my team for 2 days, or not. I speak to the people that are working, but I'm not necessarily talking to the people who've been furloughed, and actually, I need to do that. So. And it doesn't always need to be that one-to-one, does it? Because I know there's people on here today who have got big teams, standalone HR people with 150 odd people. It could be communication just one to all, can't it? It doesn't need to always be that one-to-one.
I think so. You've got to know who that is, and you've got to work hard to know who needs what. Some people are. You can find out very quickly the people that are existing comfortably. Listen, there are people in the workplace that I don't need to speak to from 1 week to the next, that just crack on, that are self-motivated. They'll ask if they need some support, and literally a chat at the coffee machine, little, how are you, see you, ta-da. That's all I'm interested in. That's them. But there's other people that just, they need that high level of engagement. They need to feel supported. They need to know that you're there. Nothing's changed. The only thing that's changed is, I think business leaders or HR people or coaches approach to that, because we're in isolation too. And there's a danger of distraction from actually doing what we should be doing. When I'm in the workplace and I see them, it's much easier to just think, I can have a quick word with them. We can't see them. So we have to be conscious about that. And we have to remind ourselves, and maybe, Eloise, make a little plan. A linear chart.
A timeline plan.
Past, ring them. But it's that sort of thing that I think the impact of that significant. There's a danger of missing it for sure.
Excellent. I've just got a couple more questions for you,
if
that's okay. So we've had another scenario in. And we've all been there, individually, but again, this is help not just for us but for you to take to your employees, where they said feedback from employees, it can be that they work the morning great, they get to early afternoon and they go into a slump. So they get to lunchtime, they've said here they've done their exercise DVD, they've eaten a healthy lunch, so it's not that they're eating the wrong things, they've gone back to work, done a little bit and then dived. So they're feeling, early afternoon, feeling tired, demotivated. What can you suggest to help get out of that slump? Okay,
there's a couple of things here, isn't there? I mean, there's so much research done on maximising performance in the. Let's take it in the workplace, because same thing. There's so much research being done. I mean, wasn't somebody talking about a 4-day week anyway, right? The point is, I didn't say that. The point is, you know where I'm going with that, is that actually the research looks at how we get the best out of our people when they're there, you know, and the time off and the rest of it. And that's why flexible working comes in, doesn't it? That's why how many people still having a lunch break at these sort of times? Okay, I'm going to retract the 4-day week thing anyway, to probably your relief all round, and certainly to my opinion's clear there. But I tell you what I am thinking about. I do know for a fact that one of the most misunderstood, what's the word? Essential components of high performance is recovery. Okay, really, really important, and it's misunderstood. Okay, so what I mean by that is when we recover the system, and if we get to fatigue level, if we're in a level of fatigue, then the actual period of recovery is greater. It requires it to be much, much longer. So what's the point here? When people feel like that, we probably, and I'm not saying always, but what can often happen is we've pushed and we've got to a point where we take the break, and just refueling and having a change is actually a negative impact, because it's basically we haven't recovered enough to want to get back. So even if we're in a normal place of work, I am really in favor, all right, of just getting people to consider that when they're at their absolute most motivated and best levels of performance and engagement, and actually encourage people to take much more regular, shorter breaks, even when they're feeling good. Because if you take a break when you're feeling good, guess what? Most of the break we filled up just thinking, I want to get back. But you just took the opportunity to recover as an energy system that's still high, right? When we try and recover an energy system that's depleted, it needs a certain amount of time, all right, to be rejuvenated and get back. It's very often, if you're in that state, that actually, I'm done, I'm cooked. It's our classic. I get the graveyard shift, as they call it, as a presenter loads of time, probably because I'm a bit loud, a bit enthusiastic, and nobody can sleep when I'm, stand at the front dancing around. But because when somebody's done that, they got a little belly full of food, do you know what? I've got enough information. They switch off. We've only got a certain amount of concentration, haven't we?
Absolutely. Is it something like 45 minutes? Don't we have 45 minutes worth of concentration and then we need a break?
Yeah, 20 to 45 minutes they talk about, so let's say 45. And the reality is, we need people to work on projects in certain areas at their desk and cover areas for longer, for 2 hours, for 3 hours. But just be aware as coaches and managers and leaders that actually, if you want to get the best out of your people, you should consider and really consider working with individuals to see when they're actually at their best. So the danger of this bit of having a full morning, then taking a break, I'm okay now because I'll get enthused. What you've done is you've took yourself out of a situation where you're already fatigued. All that you've done by having some food is make yourself feel sleepy. But of course, to do that stuff, it is about the environment, and you do need to create an environment where you are focused. You remove distractions. You get on with a piece of work that has your attention, that you're more enthusiastic about. And if you can do that in those times, then of course you're back in an energized way, with a highly motivated reason to do it. Yeah, maybe it's somebody needs something and it's somebody that, you really respect and you want to do well for. That would be a great time to do that piece of work. So I hope that covered it.
Yeah,
but
great
just
answer.
Consider, when we rest, and I would encourage more flexibility in terms of, we have to manage it, HR people, I get that.
But also it's knowing about when we're at our best, aren't we? Because some people are much more productive in the morning, some people are much more productive in the afternoon or evening. And I think one of the things at the moment, obviously depending on the position that people are in or that their employees are in, is, can you work to times when you're at your best? Because if you know that you're great in the morning at analytical work, for example, because I listened to a podcast the other day about about when we're at our best. And apparently, if I remember this correctly, actually, when we're alert, we need to be doing more analytical work. So if you're a morning person, you need to do your analytical work, if I could say the word, in the morning. And actually, our creative tasks should be saved for when we're more tired, because you are naturally more creative when you're tired, because part of your brain isn't
wants to find a solution.
Yeah.
It does. It wants to find a way to finish it, do it quickly. You know, we'll find ways around stuff. We'll find ways to do it quicker in that moment. There's some real evidence. You're absolutely right. And the thing is, sorry, go on, please.
No, carry on.
So for myself, for example, if let's take you again back out of the business world, we talked a lot about that. Bring in a sports analogy. I don't pick the times when the Olympic final is, or the world champs. Some of them at 9:15 in the morning. What, really? So these kids don't get out of bed till 11:30. Then all of a sudden, I'm telling them to get there, set their alarm for 5:30. I want them to add breakfast by 6 on the bus. But hang on a minute. We don't just rock up and do it for that day. You've got to prepare to be good in that moment. You've got to be good by 9:30 in the morning. Actually, nobody's jumped at night, but this Olympic Games, you're actually on in the evening at 9:45, because it suits the global thing. And, we want you on at 6:30 for the rest of the world. So you're jumping at like 10:30. What, really? So what's the relevance here? I'm going to say, if I know I need to be at my best in that moment, or I need energy in that moment, I have to practice to have energy at that moment. And it's not just about the work you do, by the way. It's about when you eat. It's about when you sleep, when you set the alarm, when you get up. I think there's it's not that straightforward an answer, unfortunately, but I hope we give you loads of food for thought in terms of avoiding a situation where we have this afternoon slump. I don't believe it would just be it wouldn't be in isolation in terms of energy. There would be something, I am pretty confident, shout you're wrong somebody, but I think there'll be other factors that will be affecting that slump. But I would say, manage it, think about it, and don't try and push through it. If you have to, then sometimes we have to.
So final question for you then, Graham.
Right.
This is an interesting one. So returning to normal. So it's whatever normal will be. So, upon returning to normal working conditions, potentially with social distancing, how do we motivate people to work alongside each other again?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. So I would say, one, do we have to? I know that's a big drop the bomb, but I think a lot of people should be considering, do we have to? Because I do think, listen, I think we're trying to reach, I believe if I was owning a business, or I'm a business manager, or certainly as a performance coach, I'm absolutely trying to achieve the best possible performance out of the person I'm working with. Now, as I said to you, there are so many factors that affect that. Now, we do things the way we do them because it's the plan, isn't it? We've learned that if we come to work at this time, and there's reasons we go to work at a certain time as well. It might be because that's when our clients or our customers, need us most, or etc. There's no point in doing a night shift if actually everybody wants to call us in the day, for example. And there's a reason that we ask people to come to work. And a lot of the reason we ask people to come to work is because that is what we've always done. We've worked in a particular way, and we create this environment because everything that we need to be good is in that environment. Yeah. So I remind people of why we have the work environment we have. Well, if there's an advantage to being in the environment that we've missed, remind them that this is an opportunity to go back, so the environment and the people around you can support you back in the role. And by the way, having you back, that's individuals, the team will benefit so much for having you back in the role, in the room. And it's that bit. One thing I would do, though, in terms of coming back, I think there's lots of discussions to have, isn't there, Eloise, and everybody else. There's some incredible discussions to have, and it's the impact. I don't think we should underestimate the impact of people being isolated and being sent away. And I don't think for a minute there's anybody that could possibly say that they've underestimated that, because you will be feeling that every day, all of you. And I personally don't think it'll be that straightforward to just pull them back in. So I guess that's where the question comes from.
Yeah.
In answer to that, again, it's about dialogue, isn't it? It's about having a conversation and saying, you know, I would want to find out if we can identify that people have done really, really well and they found some real sense of purpose or feel much more motivated in the work they've done. The level of the work they've done is inspiring, it's innovative. Then actually I wouldn't want to suppress that, would I, by just saying, well, this is good, we're going to have to come back because this is what we do. If we do have to have them back in the building, I don't know, how close an environment could we create that mirrors the one that you've got used to and done very well in?
Yeah, great.
There's just a few thoughts.
And part of it could be, I mean, people's concern about being so close to other people. Because I'm not sure about you, but when, you know, even when I walk down the street now with the children, I'll be like, if you're passing somebody, making sure you're two meters apart, crossing over the road so you're not too close to people. I think it's taking into account people's mental concerns about physically being close to people. They may want to be back in that team environment, and I'm sure we'll cover this at the next huddle when we talk about mental health. But it is, I think, part of it probably, and going back to what you've said previously, is about just making sure we are communicating with people, isn't it? You know, if they've got concerns, listening to them. And
I mean, so the government constantly every day, don't they? So it's like the same words, and that's their default word as they have. And they talk about, we've been listening to the scientists, and that's okay to a point, isn't it? But actually, I'm not sure that you know, Joe or Johnny or Julie Average actually want to. You know, that it's about them. It's about how they feel. It's about the fact that, you know, I don't know, the scientists, and you know, we trust them because they're scientists. But actually, you know, this has still escalated huge, and there's been incredible impact on people's lives and businesses and industry and friendships and families, even with that advice. So actually, you know, unless we get the nod that this has gone, I think you're absolutely right, that we will be guided to a point, I'm sure, by the scientists, by the experts and the chief medical officer, via the government, and they will suggest certain things. I personally think it would be really foolish not to listen to your people, because they're the ones that are going to perform. Remember, if we want the best out of someone, they're the most important person. Of course, we have to listen to the medical experts. Why would you not do that? Because they're the ones that are giving specific guidance to this particular virus. But in terms of coming back, you've got this in one hand, which is guidance. And I think you'd be mad not to be looking at that guidance. But I still think you need to hear the fears and concerns of the people, because if you're going to get the best out of them, you absolutely, again, have to create an environment, which I'll reiterate all the time. In so many different areas, you have to create a high performance environment. People will only perform well when they come back to work because they feel comfortable in that place of work. So I think it, you know, very much a discussion, create a forum or engage and have an opportunity to get as many people's concerns down as possible, and, you know, look along, you know, and compare that to the scientific guidance and make sure we can create an environment as close to one that, you know, will encourage people to be happy to come back and feel motivated to work.
Yeah, fabulous. Graham, thank you so much for all of your guidance and feedback and answering all the questions. It's been absolutely fantastic. So
thanks for the invite.
Oh, absolute pleasure. So thank you for joining us today, everybody. What I will do is send you the recording for today, and I'm also going to send you some information and contact details for Graham and Gateway HR for anybody that wants them. So our next event is going to be on Wednesday the 13th of May, and we've got Kat Marlowe as our guest speaker from Positive Change, and she's going to be talking to us about mental health for our employees. So we talked about mental health for ourselves from a HR perspective, and previously. This is for our employees, so we'll be looking at it from a furlough perspective, from a working perspective and remote working perspective. So I'll send invites out for that. But again, Graham, thank you so much. And if anybody wants to, has got any additional questions for Graham, feel free to contact him directly on the information that I'll give you, or come through myself.
I'm happy to come either through you or direct to me. That's not a problem.
Yeah, that's great. So thank you so much, everybody. Stay safe and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thanks very much.